or 4 miles away, but Ethan had no doubt about its destination. The poor excuse for a road led one place: here. The question of who would seek him out only vaguely interested him. None of the locals would come looking for him. He rarely went into town except to get supplies, and then he kept to himself. But there were hours last night he couldn't account for, time when the Jack Daniels had ruled his actions. He tried remembering what he'd done, or if he'd spoken to anyone. He had gotten into town about 9 and ordered something to eat, washing down the food with a couple or 3 beers. Then it had been straight Jack, and his memory blurred. The next thing he knew, he had awakened in his own bed with the full force of the New Mexico sun beating on his face. The dust cloud grew as the vehicle got closer. If someone had gone to the effort of driving out here, it meant trouble. He thought of the Glock, buried under 3 years of pictures and regrets within an old metal box beneath his bed. In a few minutes it would be too late, but he made no move to retrieve the weapon. If the agency had finally found him, then so be it. He'd been dead for a long time anyway. Dr. Paul Turner was a dead man. The thought struck him with icy certainty as he watched the approaching helicopter through sheets of rain. They wouldn't kill him right away, not while they still needed him, but it was just a matter of time. Then they'd make it look like an accident. He'd be on the mainland, conducting haven business, and his car would miss a turn and hurtle over a cliff, or his heart would give out due to some rare and untraceable drug delivered via a hypodermic in the middle of the night. Possibly he'd be working in the lab and discover a tear in his biocontainment suit. However they chose to end his life, no one would ask any questions or investigate the death of the once prominent Dr. Paul Turner. He had disappeared from the scientific community nearly 15 years ago, and as far as any of his peers knew, he'd been dead ever since. Paul shivered and steered himself away from such morbid thoughts. He needed to concentrate on the next couple of hours and the upcoming meeting. Then, if he was smart and very careful, maybe he would come out of this alive. Meanwhile, the rain and wind battered the aircraft as it hovered over the landing pad. The pilot fought for control, but the storm seemed determined to keep the helicopter from landing. A crash would solve his problem, Paul thought with a grim smile. Unfortunately, he had no doubt the vehicle would set down safely. The man on board, Avery Cox, wouldn't be stopped by anything as minor as inclement weather. For the past 10 years, as director and lead scientist at the Haven, Paul had answered to Cox. The facility, located on a remote, private island at the northern edge of Puget Sound, was home to a staff of doctors, nurses, teachers, and a variety of very special children. It included dormitories, classrooms, laboratories, a hospital, and the finest equipment and scientific minds money could buy. Except for his yearly trips to Langley to deliver his annual report, Paul had very little contact with Cox. Generally, he left Paul alone to run things while supplying everything he needed: money, equipment, and the most important thing of all, anonymity. In return, Cox expected Paul to deliver results, which he had done, consistently and without fail, since taking over the Haven project. Now, this. Paul had done the unforgivable, committed the one act Cox wouldn't overlook. He had lost 2 of the island's children. If he'd been given time, a couple of days, a week at the most, he would have set things right without anyone knowing the difference. His people would have found the runaways and things would have returned to normal. Unfortunately, it was too late for that. Someone had made a call, and it had taken Cox fewer than 8 hours to arrive. As Paul watched the helicopter descend, whipping the wet air into a frenzy, he realized anyone could have made that call. Cox had eyes and ears everywhere. For a moment, Paul considered running. It wasn't the first time the thought had crossed his mind. He had more than enough money stashed in offshore banks. If he could get off the island and disappear into one of the backwater countries of Central or South America, he could live like a king for the rest of his life. Except it was a fool's dream. There was no place to hide, nowhere on earth where the agency couldn't find him.